Right guys, I know you're just getting set up, but we'll start the session now because we've got quite a lot to get through. So fantastic to see you all again here. Second week of Digital Lead now, and you've all come prepared. There are some sweets and refreshments available, so please do help yourself. Absolute pleasure again to introduce Jen, Sally and Andy from Sky. As we talked about last week, the theme for this session is following on from the launch, which is to talk about what it's like to work in the world of digital and tech, the kinds of terminology that you'll come across, the kinds of working style that you'll come across, and I guess the kind of people and culture that you'll come across as well. It's really interesting to know how the digital world works compared to other industries, and it certainly has a few unique traits about it from what I've seen, and some really fantastic things that you can expect if you do go into that area really. So the next couple of hours we're going to be exploring that with some activities as well to sort of get you involved. And I've seen Lego, so that makes me excited straight away. So hopefully you're feeling pumped and excited and you've got lots of questions and you're ready to go. So I'll be here for the rest of it. But I would like to hand over now to Jen, who's going to take over the rest of the session and talk to you guys. So thank you, Jen.
Great, thank you very much. Lovely to see you all again. So yeah, I met you all last week. I'm Jen, and I've also brought my colleagues Andy and Sally along with me again today. So over the next couple of hours, we're going to be telling you a little bit about us. So I'm going to start off by telling you about my kind of journey into how I got into the role I'm in at the moment. You'll hear introductions from Andy and Sally. We're going to do a little bit of an icebreaker activity as well to begin with. And then we're going to tell you a little bit about ways of working at Sky, the different types of roles and some of the terminology that you'll come across working at Sky. And then yeah, we've got a bit of a group activity as well to put some of those things into practice. So as I mentioned last week, I'm Software Engineering Academy Manager at Sky. So I look after all things early careers, from the graduate programme, apprenticeship programme, work experience, summer placements. And I did an events management degree. So someone who doesn't come from a technical background, I'm not particularly techy myself, but I've got a very, very techy sounding job title. So kind of how does that work? Well, I studied event management, which was, I don't know whether anyone here studies events. It was essentially, so I did it back in 2008, 2011, and it was essentially a business degree, so lots of business modules, things like marketing, tourism, financial planning, but with a focus on events, which meant that it had a bit more of a practical element to it, which I really enjoyed. I also had the opportunity to go and work at Disney World in Florida for 3 months in between my second and third year, which was really, really cool. But people kind of looked at me a bit strange when I said I studied event management, and they'd kind of say, so does that mean you're going to be like a wedding planner? No, that is potentially one option, but it wasn't the option that I kind of chose to go down once I finished university. I didn't really want to work in hospitality, and a lot of the events jobs in hotels were asking for 2 to 3 years of commercial work experience, which coming straight out of university, you don't have. You've got a degree, but that's the experience is favoured over that. At that stage, I just wanted to get a job. I was living at my parents', I was working at the local home base, and I just wanted to get a proper job. So I spoke to some friends, and they were working in recruitment, and they told me a little bit about that, and I really liked the sound of working in recruitment. And I came across a job online at FDN, and it was called Recruitment and Events Consultant. And I applied, and that's where I ended up working for the next about 5.5 years. So FDN, who I know are part of the programme, the Leaping's Digital programme as well, are an IT consultancy. So I wasn't working in a technical role, but I was involved in technical recruitment. So it gave me a really good understanding of the different types of roles in technology, some of the trends in the industry, the skills that were required. So again, I was working with lots of technical people. I was meeting clients who were telling me about their requirements, but not in a technical role. During that time, I initially relocated to Manchester, and then FDN relocated to Leeds, which is how I ended up here in Leeds. And then after about 5.5 years of working there, I was contacted by a friend who was working at Sky, and that was about the role I'm in now at the moment. He said, you know, you'd be really good for it, it'd really suit your skill set. And I looked at the job title, Software Engineering Academy Manager, and I'm kind of like, I'm not a software engineer, I'm not a developer, you know, how am I going to do this? And then I actually looked down at the roles and responsibilities, list of bullet points, and most, if not all of them, were things that I had been doing in my previous role, that I could do, or that I could definitely kind of learn to do. So I made the application, I got that role, and that's where I am now, working at Sky as a Software Engineering Academy Manager. So as I say, I oversee the recruitment for our graduate programme, apprenticeship programmes. I ensure that when we have new people start on those programmes, that they are introduced to life at Sky, that they've got the equipment and everything that they need to be able to do their job. They've got laptops, they've got logins, they know how to book holidays, they know who to speak to about certain things. I also coordinate our Get Into Tech programme for women, which Sally actually came through herself, so I'm sure she'll tell you a little bit about that. But the key thing is that my role doesn't require for me to be technical, although I'm working in a technical environment. I'm required to be really, really organised and do a lot of coordination. So I guess one of my key messages is to work in technology, it doesn't have to be a technical role, and Andy's going to talk about some of the other roles as well that you might do that aren't necessarily around coding. And the second point is probably don't look at a job title and immediately think, wow, I can't do that. Make sure you read through the list of roles and responsibilities, and even if you can only do 75% of them, you know, 70%, it's still worth making that application because it will be about your attitude and your aptitude, and there's lots that you can learn. It's very, very rare that someone can do 100% of things on a job description. So that's a little bit about me and how I came from an events management degree to working in software engineering. So I'll hand over to Sally and Andy to just introduce themselves now.
Cool. Alright, so I don't have a slide, but my name is Sally Waters, and I actually studied music at university. So, I mean, I didn't even want to do music afterwards, but it was a great degree. But straight after that, I was like, what am I even going to do next? I ended up working in a low-paid admin job part-time, trying to do a bit of sort of tutoring on the side in music theory and stuff. And actually came here for a year to do a certificate in counselling, which I thought I would love, I thought I did love, but then by the end of that year I'd also decided that I didn't want to be a counsellor, so I was back to square one. So another year or two, and I was just sort of reading everything I could about careers. I found a website called 80,000 hours.org, which 80,000 hours is about the number of hours in a career, and that website is all about how to use those hours in order to make the most difference you can with your career. So it advised doing things at the start of your career which will give you skills and kind of a lot of flexibility about what you do later in your career. And coding was one of the things that was like near the top of their list. And I'd always just dismissed the whole idea of being a developer as boring. My dad is actually a developer, so I don't know where we got that idea. But I think it was partly because of being a woman, and as a girl in school, it was extremely nerdy to like computers, and only boys liked it. And it just somehow in my head got walled off as like, oh well, that's not for me, you know, I'm not going to put that on my list of options. But then I thought about it, and it's an amazing job, and I worked in admin by that point for about 4 years. I was really bored of being low paid and not getting any spare cash at all. So I started to teach myself to code, and it turned out to be relatively easy. It took a while, but only about 8 months between starting to learn to code myself and then doing job interviews and getting a job offer. So part of that was just going to local meetups and meeting the actual other people who already work in the industry. That was the scariest bit, but it was also the bit which made me the most more confident that I could actually get into it. then through that I heard about this thing called the Get Into Tech Bootcamp, which is for women that Sky runs for free once a year in January. So I was really lucky to get into that. Nowadays it's like really, really popular to get in. And by sort of the time I finished that in April, then it was like I was doing interviews, and I was amazed that even though I was still a complete beginner really, every company wants to have you, because development is an administrator you can have hundreds, but there aren't that many developers, so that was good. Yeah, and I really love working at Sky. I am a web developer. I work on the homepage of sky.com, which we recently rebuilt, and it was really cool because now it's out there, and I did part of that. Yeah, even though we're not going to be talking about coding tonight, like I'd really encourage everyone to just have a go if you're interested, because there are so many websites where you can learn it all, and yeah, it's not that hard. So, yeah. Cool, go for it.
Good stuff. Yeah, so just a bit of a different background really. I kind of grew up with computers like all my life basically. I was always around like video games all the time since I was like the age of 3 and that, and I'd always be like fascinated about what was kind of going on behind the scenes. And so like as I was growing up, I just kind of like stayed around computers, and I sort of ended up with me basically taking on a computer science degree. So I'm kind of like the classic nerdy kind of guy that's ended up in the development role basically. So go through, do a 5-year degree of computer science at the University of York, and then I took on the summer internship programs at Sky, and decided that I want to like still be a developer. I want to go work at Sky as well. So I applied for the grad scheme, and then that's how I've ended up here. So I've been in an actual team for like the last month or 2 roughly, and I've been working on the as a web developer on like the managed pages of sky.com, and so I work with a lot of like JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So as Sally was saying, it's like it looks a bit daunting from like not knowing like from the outside. Like you're just looking out, trying to look into it, and you think, oh, this is really confusing and that. But once you get like that first little step in, generally you'll be okay in that. Like there's plenty of training about. There's other people that in the community that generally want to help you out as well. So I wouldn't worry about it. Like if you've got like a slight interest of it, or like want to try and like problem solve on a day-to-day basis, then just go for it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah.
Cool. So right. First thing we got here is a tiny little icebreaker thing, which is called impromptu networking. So I'm afraid this will involve you standing up. I'm sorry. Before you have to do that though, right? The idea is that we're just going to go find one person who you haven't really talked to that much. I don't know, maybe you all know each other really well, but I don't know. So someone you don't talk to that much, and just ask these questions to each other and find out like why did they come and what do they want to learn. So yeah, basically you've got 3 minutes to do that, so go.
You'll stand up, guys.
Yeah, we'll be alright.
Oh no, I don't want to stand in front of
Oh no! Right, you
Thank you.
Thanks very much for viewing me there. I know icebreakers aren't the best sometimes, but at least we got to meet someone, so that's good. Yeah, right. Another little
icebreaker. So these are the kind of like scenarios you might come across. Maybe a bit more simpler than what we do, but this will give you a rough idea. So working in groups of 2 or 3, you're given 8 identical looking balls. One of them is heavier than the rest of the 7. All the others weigh exactly the same. You're provided with a simple mechanical balance, and you're restricted to only 2 uses of it. And you've got to try and find the heaviest ball. So working together, try and figure it out. You can write it down. You can try and do it on the machine, whatever you feel like. So how long? Like 10 minutes? Yeah.
Yeah, well, like 5 probably, because it's frustrating.
Yeah.
But it's basically a riddle, and the whole idea is to just sort of see if you even partly like this kind of thing, then you'll probably quite like coding as well. So even though we're not doing coding today, it's just like a sort of taster session, thing. So I couldn't get this, so don't worry if you can't. Go for it.
Surely like a small split. It's in that programming institute. It's in me and Abby just happened to like, she thought at the first bit, I always had a second, and then we went to the answer so we did doing like coding advice sessions to compare that as one
I think that is
Oh, cheers, thank you very much.
Oh, that is bang on. That is seriously. That is mental.
Probably haven't.
Right, together. Right, if you start, yeah, if you've got these three, right? So
Can you remember?
3, this one's heavier than all of them. So you've got 5 and you've got 1. You weigh those 2, and if they're the same, then this one's the heaviest. But if they're not, then that one's the heaviest.
Maybe just one.
So if you get me and you go, I take 2 of us. So I leave that on the side, right? Leave that on the side, you've got 6. So you weigh 3 and 3. If they're both the same, so there's 1 and 2. If they're not, then you've got 1 heavier. Then you take away 1 for the lighter and 1 for the lighter. Get it? Then you've got 3 left. If you put one on the table and weigh the next 2, one of them is either heavier or
I don't know how you manage
One more minute, go straight. Yeah. Yeah, you do.
I get it.
This is why you work in teams. Figure it out, find the point
No, I get it. So the 6. Say that wall is decided heavier. That'll value as well. But if it's not even, but if it goes that way, then it's
2. So anybody got an answer?
Yeah?
Yeah, do you want to go through it then?
Okay.
Okay, so you take away 2 from the 6, then you weigh 3 for the 3 and 3.
Yeah.
If they're even, then use the second use for the 2. Then you get 1 and 1. If
Yep.
they're not even, split the 2 away. If that's even, then it's obviously the one that you left to
Yep.
start or the one you dropped.
Bang on. That's it.
That is exactly it. Did anybody else get it? No. Okay. Awesome. It is extremely frustrating, that kind of thing, but sometimes code is also
So that's the sort of like questions you might come across in like some interviews and that when you're trying to apply for like a dev job and that. It's more about how you think on a day-to-day basis rather than necessarily getting the correct answer.
And also, there's a very key emotional skill, which is not getting too frustrated, because that's also really important. So yeah, because manage to stay patient while you don't know how to do something is a good thing to be able to do. So yeah. Right, okay, so I've got a little talk now about this thing called Agile. I don't know if anyone's like been looking at it into tech a little bit and heard about Agile, everything, a little bit. Alright, so I want to tell you what it actually is. There's a big deal in companies to be working in an Agile way, and what that actually means is literally just this. This is the whole thing. So I'll give you a second just to like skim read the Agile manifesto. So, a little bit of background to what that came from. It was written by these guys here. They are 17 white dudes in February 2001 in a ski resort for a weekend. And they got together and they wrote that Agile manifesto thing. By the way, this slide just proves that we need people of colour and we need women, please. And I mean, they did a good job. The problem they were having was that the industry of making software often came with absolutely enormous missed deadlines that went millions of pounds over budget and took 3 years longer than they thought they would, and by the time the software actually got released, it was way out of date. Wasn't really any use anymore. So that's because this was like the gold standard of how to manage a project. It was called the waterfall system. And it was based on there would be planners and their job would be to write up a huge document about exactly how they were going to do something, and then there'd be this kind of sign-off process, and that document would be passed on to the developers, and they would spend months and months and months coding it all, and then it would be passed off to like testing, and testing would inevitably be really close to the deadline by then. They would have been pushed back. They would find loads of bugs. There wouldn't be time to fix it, and either you'd have to go over time and budget, or you'd have to release code that was not that great. So the people, you know, the 17 guys, they had been software developers. They kind of knew that this wasn't working, so they wanted it to be more about actually doing rather than just like wishing that life was like a straight line and you could just plan like this. It doesn't really work. So this is basically the contrast. The point with waterfall is you don't really get anything until the very end. But with Agile, the idea is to keep on delivering little bits of smaller amounts of value as you go along. And during that whole process, you can also check whether it really is the right thing you're doing or whether you need to do something else to solve the problem. So this is a really good way of putting it. The idea is to iterate on your idea until you get to your end product, and all the time actually deliver something which can fulfill the purpose. So in this case, it's to build a vehicle basically. And in the waterfall way at the top, you don't have anything until you get to the end. But in the Agile way, you start with a skateboard, and it's not a very good vehicle, but it can take you somewhere. So that is what is called a minimum viable product. I know there's a different meaning for MVP nowadays, but this is what it means in the tech world. So the minimum viable product, it could be really as small as you can get it, but it will do the basic job that you wanted it to do. Yeah. So now I'm going to talk about a thing called Scrum, which is related to Agile, but a bit different because it's a way of it's a framework for applying Agile, because that manifesto is a bit vague. So this is actually some instructions, and the instructions say you need these 3 roles. Andy's going to talk to you about them a bit in a minute, so I won't go too far into it. But your Scrum team only needs these 3 roles and no others. We do have a couple of others in our real jobs, but in pure Scrum, this will be it. Okay, and then this is the whole list of what you need for Scrum. So there's the 3 roles at the top: Scrum Master, Development Team, and Product Owner. Then there are the kind of 3 artifacts or like things you've got. And basically the product backlog is your to-do list of everything you want to get done. But your sprint backlog is actually the stuff that you've said you're really going to do in the next 2 weeks or something. A sprint is just like a fortnight or a month or a week when you've taken on this small amount of stuff to do, and you're going to keep doing that stuff and nothing else until the end of that sprint. And the increment is the idea of what you deliver at the end of each sprint. So like the skateboard or the bicycle or whatever, this little iteration that is always going to be potentially like you could actually give it to customers because it will be working, even if it won't be completely finished as such. Then there's these 4 ceremonies. These are like meetings basically, but they're quite rigid, you've got to stick to them or else the whole thing falls apart. So the daily Scrum is just 15 minutes where you have to stand up, so it can't last too long, can't drift into being a full meeting. Those are really boring. It's 15 minutes because you're just going to tell everyone else in the team what you're doing and what you did yesterday and if you've got any problems, and that's it. So everyone keeps up to date with what everyone else is doing, and you sort of knitting together, that's good. And then the other 3, sprint planning, review and retrospective, only happen once a sprint, so maybe once every 2 weeks. You will review what you just delivered. You'll kind of show everyone what you delivered. You'll have a retrospective just in your team to decide what worked well and what didn't work well about how you went about things. And of course you'll plan the next sprint and decide what tasks you're going to take in for doing in the next 2 weeks. And that's it. That is all there is to Scrum. There are some subtleties and a bit more detail, but it isn't even a software thing, it's just a planning thing, like a way to work together in teams, which I was really excited about when I first heard about it. I'm a bit of a nerd about Scrum because I ended up using it in my own life. So, oh yeah, this is a good diagram for showing how it kind of fits together. So this is the kind of sprint cycle, and you can see those ceremonies fitted in. So you start with planning, form the sprint backlog from planning, go around in these loops where every day you're doing a little daily scrum, and then by the end you've got this increment you can show in sprint review, and retrospective to go back into another sprint. So it's continuous. You're always doing kind of every bit of the process, like a little bit of testing, a little bit of planning, you know, and you're not in this huge waterfall stages. So that's my husband. Slight diversion into my personal life here, where basically the reason I'm so interested in Scrum is because my husband has ADHD, which stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And some of you may know it's like a disorder which causes you to be unable to hold goals in mind and plan towards them and take action towards them. And it's actually a really big deal because my husband couldn't really get anything done. He was working really low-wage jobs and our house was a mess. Anyway, so we also had a wedding to plan, so that was a bit anxiety-provoking. And I'm a feminist, so I wanted him to do like at least some of the work. So the thing that happened was that I went to Sky. First day, this Agile stuff is so important that Sky teaches it for the first 3 days of the grad program before you start coding for anything. And once I heard about it, I went home. I was like, "We're going to try this," and we're still doing it about a year and a half later. And in that time, he's like, just today, he texted me saying, "I've applied for the emergency care assistant role, and they're the people who like assist the paramedics by driving the ambulance and stuff to places." So he's getting close to actually achieving a goal where he'd have an amazing career rather than being a delivery cyclist, which sucks, to be honest. As a career option, it sucks. So yeah, Scrum can be applied to anything, including actual life. So don't just think of it as a software thing, basically. That's all I want to say. Cool. So it's over to Andy.
Cool. Thanks, Sally. So, as Sally said, there's loads of different roles within Scrum. So these are generally the roles that we kind of cover at Sky. So you've got your product owner, business analyst, Scrum Master, and then development team. And the development team encompasses both developers and testers. So I'm just going to talk to you pretty much about each of the roles now. So product owner is basically like the main decision maker and stakeholder. That basically what they say goes, and you need someone in that team to kind of be the decision maker to say like, oh, we want this feature, we don't want this feature, and kind of like shield you from potentially like other stakeholders coming in trying to change what your kind of end goal is. Because otherwise nothing will basically get done. You'll have someone coming to you saying, oh, this needs to be done, and you keep diverting all over the show. It just won't happen. So the idea is that they help kind of like maximize the value of your product at the end. So for example, in my day-to-day life at Sky, I'm kind of like working on like the web pages, so just kind of making sure that the main features of them pages are being done for each sprint. Yep, and so like any team that wants changes that are associated with my team in particular, they have to go through them first to make sure that it can be done, and it's not deterring attention away from our current goal. So the business analyst is kind of like, you don't need it for the Scrum and Agile manifesto, but it kind of helps us like on a day-to-day life. So they're kind of like the little, the middle guy in between us developers and the stakeholder, and they kind of just make sure like everything's kind of like ticking along pretty good. So they come up with like all the different tickets that we need to do, making sure that we've got like acceptance criteria so that we know as developers that we're hitting the right things to then meet the product owner's feature requirements. They get questions from other teams directed to them, and then they'll say whether they can do it or not. And they usually so for example, my team as well, whenever a change happens, it's sometimes across the entire website. So they have to say something about, oh yeah, this release is going ahead. Is this going to affect any of the other teams or anything? And just making sure everyone's kind of fully aware of what's happening. And then also ensure that by talking to the product owner that we have a priority list. So you'll have your sprint backlog and you'll have tickets in there. And the idea is just that they're going to make sure they're prioritizing the right order so that we get the maximum value coming through. So a Scrum Master kind of is the person that kind of just helps facilitate the team to do Scrum. As a development team and as a product owner and business analyst as well, we're kind of meant to be self-managing and sufficient, but Scrum Masters kind of help us make sure that process is still ticking along, ensuring we're not being blocked by anything for I don't know, we've got a weird chair or something like that at work, and we need to make sure that we're meeting health and safety standards, things like that. They'll try and help us fix those issues, and they also help run the Scrum process as well with sprint reviews, retrospectives, and health checks. So just making sure that the team's generally okay with their day-to-day life. And finally, the development team, which is basically the grunts. We do all the work that the product owner says. We'll have a feature on the page, so we've got to code within a certain period of time, and we'll be one of those people doing it. So we'll be ticking off against acceptance criteria. Developers will be making the feature, and then the testers will go and test it. And then we'll figure out if it's affecting any other products along the way, how much effort we need to do and such. So all of these roles just help us ensure that every team in Sky is kind of ticking along. We're doing our job, and then we're getting good value for the business in the end. So to kind of help build up all that knowledge you just kind of learned from us, we've got a group task for you.
Yes, so this is actually another kind of interviewee thing to do, because in our coding interviews it's kind of a whole day thing, and we are actually trying to code something in a team with the other applicants. And they do it using, as if we were in a Scrum team, but instead of a week or 2 weeks, they make the sprints 45 minutes long. So it's very, very, very compressed, but they really want to see, as well as how we can code, how we actually work in a Scrum Agile way. So we're going to do that even more compressed, and we're going to do it with 15-minute scrums, 15-minute sprints. So this is roughly how it's going to work. I think we're running ahead of time.
We are.
Nice, this gives you more time to do the exercise. So it is a Lego exercise. I really hope you're not too disappointed that we're not doing a digital thing on a digital day, but this will apply all of the Agile thing, which, as I say, was so important that they put that before any of the actual coding stuff that they taught us. So yeah, we're gonna, I think these tables are fine. Maybe a couple of people from this side of the room could go onto this table, because there's a lot of people over this side and not so many people this side. Anyway, we're going to get the Lego divided up, and once we're sort of done that, we'll actually talk through how we're going to do this. So let's go. Cool. So,
This could be one thing.
yeah, absolutely. Right, here's your supply. There we go. Hopefully someone's brave. Okay, get one of these.
I've got one over there.
These were other people at Sky. I have them around the office, and so people donated to Lego.
Together, they see together.
There it is.
That's all about it. Where they live.
Right, you get that back here. Right, we're going to need one person per table is going to be the product owner. So you're not the person who does the actual building of the Lego, but you do make the final call on like all the things that actually get built. So it's quite cool. It's up to you. You get like a minute to decide. Go.
I don't mind. They don't really want to play with the Lego.
So.
Yeah, I'd love to do.
Okay. We have a
Decided?
Okay, who's product owner? Put your hand up. Cool, nice.
Yeah.
Yep, we got one. Awesome. We are going to be your Scrum Masters. So I know there's only 3, but we'll just try and rotate around you all. So we'll be helping you like in the planning and that bit in the middle, the retro. We're doing a bit of a mashup between a daily stand-up and a retrospective. So yeah, but we're also not actually doing the building. We're just kind of trying to unblock any problems we've got. Yeah, so we're ready to start with the planning. We'll start to get the post-it notes out, I guess.
Yeah.
So just a reminder, yeah, the brief, by the way, is to build a house where 2 Lego people could live, okay? And do remember to try and have a usable iteration by the end of the first sprint and not just at the end of the whole thing, right? Because it's you kind of build one thing and then you build on that to make it better. Yeah, product owner makes decisions about what to do, but not how people should do it. So it's not the product owner's role to go in there and start micromanaging all the developers. And we really do have a limited time and amount of Lego, so you can't change those. That's what used to get changed in Waterfall. They used to throw more money and more time at it. But instead, what Agile does is you limit the scope of what you're doing. So cut down on those, like all the extras that you want to make, but you don't have time to do. Cool.
So can I just go back? So when we say we want by the end of the first sprint a minimal viable product, does everyone know what we mean by that?
Got some idea.
Do you want to explain what we mean by an MVP?
Yeah, well, it was this, like, if you're aiming for a car, think first of all like skateboard. Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, if you're anything like me, you always want to like do a really big good thing, but then that's not the way it works. So, yeah. Right, the planning bit, we've got kind of exercise for this as well, because it's so short that we kind of thought we might help with the way you could plan. We're going to make a minimum specification, so the absolute minimum requirements in a list of post-it notes.
We use a lot of post-it notes.
Yeah. Scrum Masters are actually known for their obsession with stationery, by the way. If you like stationery, good role to be in. Here's an example of like all these requirements you'd like to have for a meeting and the ones you actually need. Okay? So you see how like most of them are not true requirements, they are just extras. So we're going to do, everyone grab the post-it notes and like get a few each, and we're going to spend the first just 2 minutes individually writing down one per post-it, like the tasks you want to do to build this house. Okay, anything. These can be all the extras, everything you think of, just don't limit yourself to it.
So breaking down the task of building a house. What are the
So
steps?
every little bit.
Step you need to take. A Lego house.
And this is everything. This isn't just the min specs right now. It's just generating a full list of everything in your team. So 2 minutes by yourself, and then we'll group them together, like throw them in a big list.
Was that t-shirt on purpose for this?
Wore it today.
What, is he in town?
Lego
I just heard that. Lego house.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, I didn't realise it. Honestly, that just happened.
Push should have kind of
Nah.
Yeah, we should have had a little picture.
So we need another timer, just 2 minutes to go first.
Your 2 minutes up.
Are we right? It'll be 58. 50.
You're really doing well with the time.
You out for a drink?
Yeah, no, I'm alright. I was just going to use a bin. I'm just going to Yeah.
Hands on and stuff.
Yeah.
Happy with that?
One thing to post it note, guys, is
Write whatever. You want your Legos to have a garden, go for it. You want it to have a tree in the back, whatever.
This is just pure brainstorming.
Well, we'll do it.
Can you run a one that just went everywhere? Okay, yeah. It's really sad with my OCD, yeah. They're only red. So I was one of the kids that separated.
Exactly. That's what I wasn't sure when we were saying minimal backlog. Basically, just matter what it's like. It doesn't matter the interface, but it's just to get aware from what we next. So that we're going to have these features, we're going to create use that mirror. Yeah,
All right.
kind of 6 months.
Next stage, everyone, is to put all of them together in one big list. And, like, see if you've missed anything, add any more, you know, get really everything you possibly can on this house. We're actually running well. That's fine. And we're still trying to go back. So let's go. I'm going to round back how we're doing. Yeah. Some 5 minutes. Cool. Okay, so
I put 4 walls with no holes because I feel like half the piece on, there's a gap between it. Yeah. So that's max spec. Sort of like, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's that same space bit, so max spec, no holes to go. Yeah, no, that's a good shout. Like it.
Thank you very much.
You can have things like that. And a final.
Yeah.
Is the door essential?
Yeah,
I think so.
It's the doorway.
Doorway, yeah.
Yeah, if anything that's useful for us, safe space. Yeah. Measurement specs. Yeah, that's pretty important actually. If we just build one side and
to make sure it's big enough for 2 Lego.
yeah.
I'm very sorry we do not. I'm just very glad we found enough Lego to be honest.
I like that big, maybe a bit bigger.
There's a few mixed in as well.
Yeah, we're going to
Add some Lego. It's a bit like communication. Yeah. So we're kind of like posting like
Yeah. I think that's a good start.
Said that about 3 times split it up, so one person does one agreed on like how many squares exactly. Then when we put it together, it's not going to be as
So how many dots long and how many dots?
I said 11 person fits on 2 slots, so I say it needs to be 6 dots. And I mean,
so you mean like yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So I've actually
The next stage on says, start going straight to
-4 because you're adding 2 other ones to the
generally this is what I'm going to go for it. I guess
even if it's not, by which time, the requirements changed or whatever it is, so it does tend to work through a lot of especially in such a big but yeah, if you're starting to
Let's start with the studio.
if you guys feel like you've really get all like the elements in house and the one have it change kind of the way they change go through they normally approach it and say like if you get away you would be somewhere to be like sign off basically 2 pounds you can just so it could be in the workshop. I mean, well, that's one of my concerns.
Once they feel like that they're having sprints, easier to attach the
Are we going to operate this actually that the floor is just gone, or we can build it back up? Yeah. It's still technically that's still real, isn't it? Yeah, it's still so operate this actually the floor, the roof is all the way connected to the station. Right, so we split it into so one big room and one big room.
how wide and how what
Let's say that was on 4 and outside. Right, that's yeah, no, that's beside that. That's the issue there with that.
Oh, and you still, I guess you still might have
I think the only thing that's got was the same bit.
Yeah.
So we're saying that this is going to be on.
We are. So the first one is supposed to be 15 minutes. Maybe more. And it's not.
Well, that's up to the product owner. The actual task is just build a house and choose their and the minimum requirement of that is technically just 4 walls basically. And then up to the product owner. Like, if they want to what else they want, probably maybe even dimensions. Product owner
Some reason I'm saying that is the minimum that you have bit. That's the very, very minimum. Well, yeah.
You know, when it's kind of 12 hours and it's October, November, you just sometimes think
I'm just not really.
so many mistakes sometimes.
Are we going to separate them?
Yeah, that's good actually, yeah.
Just say when energy levels.
Overthinking outside of the side. That's
So have you gone through each of those pages?
Yeah. Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, it's kind of busy. But it's, it's great.
I've done it in twos. Okay, divide up the two. Sorry. Yeah, but we count those because if you did one big wall, one big wall back, and then those two, then and then
对的。 That's just yeah, so like 6 leg spaces, like see if that's all
as a team, it's all about that minimum viable product. It's all about what we do. First sprint is going to be coming up. So we're doing there you go, yeah, pretty much that. So that'll be at least sprint, yeah. So if you happen to complete that within sprint 1, for example, you might be able to pull other requirements in, so you could then put in, bring the chimney in, bring... This is what happens. They're in like me. They do, they'll be like the standard. I'll talk to you about it later on. It's basically like, I just... Sorry? So I've been at Sky for 7 months, and then actually in a team for about 2. Well, I did it I mean, that is almost confident about the and then get a check for like 5 weeks. Yeah, it's starting like July. I finished my so I had like 3 weeks off and then went straight to the job. I mean, it was like 5 weeks. I've still got 18 days off as in a year I can take off.
Is that a way of building rooms? It's really
Yeah.
I'm saying it wrong.
That's true.
It's hard to say. So I used to have a lot of contact with legal community, all that stuff, and then I got
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, hold on to it. Yeah.
constantly learning about dominate my brain now.
Yeah.
If we make this a 4 walls,
The roof effect.
and then we can build on top.
Yeah. It does make you kind of think about potential jobs out there. Yeah. Right, yeah.
I'm not being any help.
Yeah.
Have fun.
How long have you worked in the
University,
Because you know you say you're in York for a little while, yeah.
How do the kids do that?
I remember like sitting together and you have to get
I've used it.
Right, yeah.
So I've worked for 4 universities in the 9 years.
I'm really annoyed by this thing, so I don't want it to make up
really try and make decisions based on actual data, rather than just what might take place.
See myself still doing what we do. How did you check for me? I've got like
But we're actually going to get somewhere based on
how many months like target
Yeah.
work out?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, I feel like